programs such as this one. And usually, well, not usually, always, if the presentation and the videos are recorded, they will also be posted on the website. So, you know, people who missed the meeting or just want to go back and view something again can find it. So it's good for historical purposes. And tonight's topic is Classic Vehicle Restoration by Tara Lavelle, and I will now turn it over to Kai. It's yours now, Kai.
Okay.
Let me unshare. Okay, you got it.
All right, good, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, start from the last page first. Please mute your audio and turn off video to save bandwidth. And you can use the chat box to ask questions. The speaker will answer later, or you may turn on both video and audio to ask questions up at the Q&A session. So I think most of you done that. Make sure your username is kind of easily readable, just like mine, Kai W or something that's simple to recognize. We need to count how many members, how many guests. Okay, tonight's meeting is a joint meeting between the live member and the consultant network. Let me put in this guy. Yeah, okay. So I'm the chair. Tom Green is our vice chair. Bill Martino is our treasurer, and Clyde Spingen is our secretary. I'm also double up as a program manager, and John's our webmaster. So I do that every month because we're always looking for topic speakers, and maybe you can be our future speakers. So things that are interesting to us are technology, 5G, IoT, AT, smart home, smart city type. And also, since most of us are retired, we look at finance, hobby, travel, education. And we really want to know about your story and your contribution to the field. And want to take the topic of health and aging, and look at some history of some engineering and science achievements. A little bit for class for July 15. We have a gentleman from Everspin to talk about MRAM. It's a memory technology. And we're still looking for a speaker in August. Tonight's meeting, vintage car restoration. Terry is our speaker. He's a retired EE. He joined Sperry Univac mainframe computer in 1966, and we moved to Motorola in 1978 and get into chip business. He started as a proposal engineer and worked his way to system and architect. Work on the early time of the 60,000 family and also the RISC architecture 88K family. And he spent a few years in AMD, and then he moved to some CAD company, CAD company, Cadence in 2000. And he changed to do some modeling, and then moved to a new company, Verifab, in 2005, and he retired in 2010. And he has earned 10 patents. And tonight, Terry is going to tell his story on turning his hobby in vintage car restoration to a successful small business with his system engineering approach. Terry, please turn on your switch. Let's see. That's housekeeping, already done that, and stop share. All right. Okay, please start. Probably you're still on mute.
Harry, you're still on mute.
Did you enjoy the lip reading? Is anybody good at lip reading? Anyway, I just give you a little bit of background on how I got involved in doing this restoration work, and just some of the highlights of the different cars that I've restored, and what I faced when I started them, what I ended up with, and basically, like I said, some of the highlights of the issues that were that I experienced. When I retired in 2010, one of the things that I wanted to do, Sandra and I own a 1963 Jaguar XKE, and we've owned it since 1970. And we've driven it. It's got 211,000 miles on it. So it's a driven car. And hang on just a second. And we kept it in pretty good condition, but I decided to take it down and restore it to its original color and condition, just so that we could be real proud of it. But before this actually happened, an elderly lady that we have been friends with for over 40 years, in fact, this is her house in the background. Okay, she approached me and asked me if I would be interested in restoring some of her old classic cars. And her husband and she had collected cars all their life. At one time, I think they had 27 cars. Okay, but all very expensive cars, very vintage, but they moved around quite a bit, so they had to start cutting that down. When they moved to Austin, I think they brought 13 cars with them. And everything went fine until Frank finally passed away in 2008 at 94 years old. And a lot of these cars had been sitting for, some of them a minimum of 25 years, some of them for almost 40. Without being touched at all, never being started or anything. So Meredith had all these cars sitting here, and she said, well, let's contact somebody and see if they would come in and give us an idea of how much they would just offer us for the cars as is. Well, an expert from Houston came in and looked at all of the cars, and he said, I'll give you $15,000 for the whole lot of them. Of course, after we stopped laughing, we told him we were not very interested. So I talked with Meredith more, and we kind of came to a business arrangement where I would do all the technical work, and she would pay for all the parts. And then when we sold the cars, we would split the profits. I thought that's a pretty nice little business model, and it's something I'm interested in and I would like to do. So I told her I would do that. She had, at the time, she had 6 cars.
Terry, looks like we lost your audio.
It was actually very original, and it looked, other than dusty and a little grimy on the inside, it didn't look too bad. So I told her I would start with that one, and that's exactly what I did. I pulled it out. I pulled it out of their display center downstairs, brought it up to the garages that you see up here, and I started working on it. And I ran into a few things. This is just a couple of pictures of it as I finished it. But what I ran into was that the engine hadn't been started. And I don't know if you know much about cars and engines, but when you let an engine sit for a long period of time untouched, it's very critical how you try to start that engine back up. You can, most people that don't know that will go in and they'll put a new battery in, they'll put gasoline in the car, and then they'll go in and they'll just start cranking it and try to start it. That's assuming that the engine's actually turning. A lot of these engines, when you try to turn them initially, they won't move, because when you park the car, you've got all these valves in the engine, and some of those valves are sitting in an open position. So it could be an exhaust valve that's open and it's feeding directly out to the exhaust, which is open to the air. So you're getting atmospheric air coming back in, and humidity and dust back in through the cylinder. And a lot of times what will happen, that will freeze the pistons. So, and this is on all of them. They all tend to experience this to one degree or another. Luckily, this one wasn't too bad. It would actually rotate when I put a crank on it and move the engine. It would actually rotate around. So I thought, oh, that's a good start. So what I decided to do, I pulled all the spark plugs out of it. I pulled the carburetors off of it, and I made sure that the battery was set up, and I drained the oil, I drained the water, I refilled it with fresh oil. I put water in it, and I sprayed something called Marvel Mystery Oil into each one of the cylinders. That sounds like the old, what do they call them? The witch doctors and everything had a remedy for everything. Well, this Marvel Mystery Oil is something that anybody that's worked in the car business will know is absolutely fantastic. It attacks rust. It basically eliminates rust. It literally frees up things that you couldn't free from just physical work. So I filled each one of the cylinders with those. I let it sit for about 2 weeks, and I cranked it over, put a little bit more in. I let it sit another week. I drained all of that out, filled the oil up, filled the gas up, and I rebuilt the carburetors, put them back on, and I started cranking the engine over without the spark on it. Finally, the oil pressure came up. It looked really good. So I put everything back together. I started the engine. It ran perfectly. I cleaned all the interior, I cleaned the outside. I went through the suspension, basically just completed the cleaning of the car. And as an end result, what you can see here is this is the paint job. I didn't do anything to it. This is just cleaned and polished. The wheels, all original. The wheels themselves are chrome. Other than cleaning them, didn't have to do anything to them. I took the interior out, cleaned all of the seats and everything, basically put some new carpeting in it. And we sold this car to a gentleman in southern France, in Nice, for quite a few $1,000s, much more than we could have sold it for in the US. So that was a very good start to our work. And so we decided to progress from there and start on the next car that they had, which was a car that they had purchased in 1966, brand new, XKE, 2+2 sedan. It had, at the time that I started restoring it, this is a picture of it when it was at a concourse, which it won. It actually won Grand National Champion in the Jaguar meets. It was a beautiful car, but there again, it had sat for almost 25 years. It was sat down in their gallery. It sat next to one of the other cars, which is a Ferrari, which unfortunately caught fire. And before they could put the fire out, you can see the result here that it burned the front fender of the car, heated it up real bad. And then when the firemen came in and sprayed, they got spray all over the rest of the car. Well, this destroyed Frank, and he just kind of parked all the cars and left them. So this is basically what I was left with to start working on. We basically took and polished out the rest of the car and then repainted this part of the fender and matched it perfectly to the rest of the paint. We took the interior out, the seats, the carpets. You can see if you look real closely in here, all these little white spots. These are all moths. They were basically eating the wool carpet. Okay, of course, 25 years of being able to do that. They did a pretty good job on it. You can look at the leather seats in the back. I had the front seats out, but you can see all the mold and the grime on them. So it took a lot of heavy duty work to get that back to shape. Now the engine doesn't look too bad, but a car with only 9,500 original miles on it, this looked terrible. It was just completely corroded. I had to go through the same process of getting it started, getting it cranked over and worked and cleaned up and everything. But I was successful in starting the engine and it running perfectly. Here's a shot of the interior. You saw how grubby it looked before. This is the interior when I finished it. And just to be sure you know, all of this stuff is original. I didn't replace any of this up here. I didn't replace the seats. I didn't replace the dash or any of this stuff. The only thing I replaced were the carpets that were eaten, but the car looked absolutely brand new. I redid the engine, completely cleaned it up, got it running perfectly without any issues at all. As you can see, it looked brand new. This is a picture of it sitting in the driveway after I finished. We sold this car to another Frenchman in Grenoble, and he paid about 4 times the price that you could sell this car for in the United States. And he was absolutely astounded that he could buy this original car with the original 9,500 miles on it, one owner, and it looked absolutely brand new. He still owns it today and is very pleased with it. So that was my second restoration. And then we started on our third restoration. This is a picture of a 1972 Ferrari GT 365 GT C4, brand new. Well, it's a 72 car. It had 3,500 miles on it since brand new. They bought it brand new, almost never drove it. This is what it looked like when they shipped it from Chicago to Austin. So it looked beautiful, just an absolutely gorgeous car. He almost never drove it the whole time. He drove it once in a while, but about 1985, he went out to his display center and he tried to get it started and it wouldn't start. So he pulled one of the air cleaners off and sprayed ether into the carburetors and then cranked it back over and it backfired. Well, it started up, the engine started, but the backfire blew one of the fuel hoses sitting in the back of the car. And after about 10 seconds of the car running, the fuel atomized and caught fire from the spark on the distributors and it blew up. And it completely ruined the car. This is the same car. You can see that I had the engine out of it when I took this picture, that you could see the devastation on the car. I had about 3 experts in car restoration look at it and say they wouldn't even consider trying to restore it. They said it was just completely gone. So I said, well, here's the engine. This is one of the last 12-cylinder engines built by Ferrari, and it had 6 Weber carburetors on it. And you could see it was, even though the engine only had 3,500 original miles on it, the heat and everything pretty much destroyed the engine. And you could see some of the wiring, and it was absolutely, literally melted. So I had what I considered a pretty big task on my hands. So I basically tore it all apart, started with everything. I took all the wiring out. I basically refabricated the wiring in my garage and took all of the electrical components and put them down on my garage floor and hooked them up and got them all working outside of the car. So that was the first step to everything. You can see the relay panels. That's one set of relays. Then there was a whole set of relays on the bottom side of the panel as well. And these were all the stuff that was melted in the fire. And you can, as you can see, all my labels of where these things go. This is all of the pieces that I pulled off of it, including the radiator, the hood, all the engine components and everything. And I'm not disorganized. I just kind of piled them in pieces so that I could get everything off of the car so I could get it to the painters. And then I started reorganizing things. Here's the engine after I rebuilt it. I've got it on an engine stand, and I basically started it up outside of the car, tuned it up, got it as best as I could tune it with the tools that I had, up and running and ready to go back in the car. Here's what the car looked like when we started putting it back together. The interior looked absolutely brand new. Now, really interesting, this dash, we didn't have to rebuild. It actually just kind of cleaned everything up and kind of refurbished it. It's called mouse hair. It's a real fine, fuzzy, almost like a felt. And it was undestroyed. You saw how the windshield was cracked from the heat. This was almost untouched by the heat. It was absolutely amazing, really. Okay, so this is the engine back in the car, the hood on it. This is a engineering marvel. Everybody looked at it. Nobody could believe I did all this by myself and put it back in the car. Now I did have help putting the engine in. It's just really too hard for one person to do. But I got it in, I got it up and running. And here's the final picture of it before we sold it. And we sold it to a gentleman in California, in Fresno, who still owns it. He shows it at Monterey and wins his class in the Ferrari division every year. And he said, no one knows that this isn't an original with 3,500 miles on it. So that was my real, this took 2.5 years to do. And I worked, as Sandra can attest, I worked about 6 days a week, sometimes 10 and 12 hours a day. The next car that I restored was a 73 Porsche 911. And this is what it looked like sitting in the garage. And it had gone untouched for almost 30 years. And the engine had been, part of the engine had been partially pulled apart. Now, this was a little bit of a unique car because we actually sold this car to Hector Ruiz. I don't know if many people know Hector, but he was the one of the presidents of Motorola Semiconductors and then the CEO of AMD. We sold this car to Hector with the one caveat that I would help him restore it. So we took it over to his place. I pulled the engine out of it. After many long, hard days, I finally found out what had been taken off of it and what was missing. I had the engine rebuilt, put it all back in the car with basically all brand new parts, completely refurbished the interior. This is all the original stuff. None of this is store-bought. This is all the original stuff just taken out and cleaned very well and put back in there. The paint
lost the audio again.
Stored for the lady. The next thing I got back to was what I originally had started to do, and that was to restore my XKE, which we had owned for 40 years at the time. So I started on this, I pulled it all apart, same thing, completely down, completely tore all the wiring out of it, took all of the components off of it, rebuilt the rear suspension, rebuilt the engine, completely repainted the frame. Everything was a completely frame off restoration, rebuilt all the front suspension, put all the interior back in, rewired it completely, put all heat coating inside of it. This is, by the way, this is the original color of the car. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to put it back to its original condition. And you can see it sitting in the body shop as I'm putting all the pieces back together on it. You can see the Cobra sitting over here waiting for me to get done so they can get started on that. But here's the interior after I finished it. Here's the engine after we finished it, completely restored. A shot of the exterior of it, another shot of it sitting out in the driveway. And basically, I still own that car. I'll probably never sell it. And we drive it on a pretty regular basis. So I've been offered $225,000 for it, but I'm not interested in selling it. So the last one restored was another car of Meredith's, but we bought this car from Meredith unrestored. Now, this is an interesting car. They bought it from people in Beverly Hills, California. Sandra, what was the writer's name?
Peter Vittel.
Okay. He was a screenwriter in Beverly Hills, and he was the boyfriend of Deborah Carr, who was a famous actress. And he owned this car at that time, and they drove around in this car in Beverly Hills. Well, Frank and Meredith bought this car from him, but when I took it, it hadn't been touched for almost 35 years, completely untouched. You can see where the paint was peeling off of the car. It was pretty corroded. The engine was a mess. So I took this one completely down to the frame, took the body off of it, took all the fenders, everything else off of it. We redid the tub. A friend of mine who does painting helped me do that. We put it all back together, and this is as we started to reassemble it. This is the interior. By the way, this is the original interior. All I did was clean this up. This is the original vinyl that was in the seats, the dash, everything. So that was one of the benefits. I didn't have to do that. But here's a final picture of it. It's a beautiful car. It's fun to drive. It's very enjoyable. We love driving it all the time. Okay, that's the cars that I've restored, and you can see them in my garage here, my Jag and the MGTD. And this is the last car I bought. This is a 66 Sunbeam Tiger, totally unrestored, original, that I plan on going ahead and restoring back to brand new in the very near future. But this is basically the summation of all the cars that I've restored. And I have to admit, from an engineering perspective, the demand basically covered every area of engineering you'd ever want to consider. So if you think it's something for the lighthearted, don't ever try it. So I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but I think I'm getting too old to do too many more. That's it. Any questions?
Hi,
Okay.
Terry. Someone asked about if you could spend a little time to talk about the costs involved, because obviously you have to buy a lot of parts to restore these cars. And then I guess especially for those European cars, how easy or hard is it to find parts?
Actually, none of them were. The Ferrari was the only one I really had trouble finding parts for because they only built 500 of those worldwide and only 160 of them through the United States. So the parts for them were very, very limited. So I tried to restore it in a manner where I had as few parts to replace as possible. But the MGTD, there's 5 or 6 companies in the world that build just about everything you need for them. The Jaguar is cheaper to rebuild than probably any US car you guys own. Okay, the Tiger's a little bit tougher because it was a limited edition. The Porsche was not real expensive. The engine was cost me about $10,000 to rebuild the engine, but they're pretty unique, and that's probably not an unusual price for them. But all the others, what did I pay? I probably put about $15,000 in the MG, but I mean, I put a lot of new things on this MG. I put about probably about $35,000 in the Jaguar. Now, I want to also tell you, we paid $1,300 for this Jaguar when we bought it. $1,300, okay? And it only had 17,000 miles on it. So we put about $35,000 in restoring it. And when I finished restoring it, I was offered point blank $225,000 for it. So sometimes you can't let what you invest in it blind you as to what the possibilities of the return is. This one's worth probably $45,000 the way it sits today. The Ferrari, the Porsche was probably about $60,000. We put about $8,000, no, about $18,000 in the Porsche rebuilding it because it cost about $10,000 to build the engine. The Ferrari, different story. We put about $65,000 in the Ferrari.
Wow.
Okay, but we sold it for $155,000. And she'd been offered $15,000 for all of those cars, including the Ferrari. So considering everything, it was a pretty good return on the investment. So does that answer that?
So I have a question. How do you crank the engine by hand? You
Most
take
of
it out
them,
first, or
well, most of them have a bolt that sits on a pulley on the front of the engine,
okay?
and you just put a wrench and a big ratchet on there, and you basically take the spark plugs out of it and put it in neutral, and you basically see if you can move the engine.
So it
If it
looks like
doesn't move, if it doesn't move, you have a problem on your hands.
so they're all strict engine.
Yeah, most of them experience the same problem, so the same techniques work on almost all of them.
Okay. So I heard that the tires can only good for 8 years, but you say you have the original tires. Are they still
Well-
workable, or need to replace them?
Well, on all of them, the 67 E-Type, it had white walls on it. Those were the original tires on the car. Now, if you walked up to the car and looked at it, from the photo I showed, it looked pretty good because I
Mhm.
cleaned them up.
Mhm.
But if you look at it, there's cracks all
Yeah.
through it.
Okay,
And
yeah.
the buyer insisted on leaving the original tires on the car. And I
Okay.
said, but for everything, do not drive this car with those tires on it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
He literally picked it up at the boat dock,
Uh-huh.
towed it to his museum and put it in the museum.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but most of these other cars, the tires have been changed on them for driving.
Okay, okay.
But like the Ferrari, I have the original Michelin XWX tires that went on it. They're the original tires that were sitting on there when I restored it.
Mhm.
And when I took the pictures of it, those were the tires sitting on it. But later on, we put new Michelins on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to drive any of those cars with those kind of miles on them.
right.
Or dates, tire, you know.
Someone asked, how difficult is it to work on convertible models?
Should be easy.
Very easier to work on than hard tops. Well, from what perspective though? You mean restoring the hard top?
Actually, if you are still there, you could unmute yourself and ask and respond too.
Yeah, everybody can do that. Unmute yourself and then just ask questions.
And somebody asked, tell us about your shop and tools.
Well, my garage here is a 3-car garage, but I put a lift in it so we can put 4 cars in it. I don't do any restoration work here. Let me take you back real quick. And I'll take a picture of all of this area here. This is all done. The lady who asked me to restore her cars for her, she had I'll show you a picture of it. I'll get to it. Be patient.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Okay. She had this is just 2 of the garages. There's another garage over here to the right. So she had a 3-car garage that was actually big enough to put 4 cars in, but the center garage and the right-hand garage both had lifts in them. So you actually had hydraulic lifts. So you could actually put 5 cars in this garage. And one of the agreements that we had was when I finished restoring her cars in this garage, then I had full use of this garage for my work. So all of my restoration work was done here. So I didn't have to do any of that in my own garage.
So it's like going to work.
Oh yeah, yeah. Put my nice, clean, dirty clothes on and drive off to work.
Wow, great work.
So in fact, Sandra and I have a joke. I used to put on my work clothes. Of course, going to work at Motorola or any of the semiconductor companies, you always got dressed up pretty decently and everything. And I always walk in before I leave and my old grubby shirt say, I'm all dressed, I'm going to work. She just shake her head.
Yes.
Don Osborne asked, do you have many friends that call you for car questions?
I have a lot of people that ask me car questions. Unfortunately, I have a lot of people that ask me if I will work on their cars. And that's a pretty quick question. That's absolutely not. Yeah, I don't do this for a living. I just did this for a hobby. I'd be glad to answer questions for people. I don't have any problem with that at all. I'm very free to answering questions for people. In fact, I will actually help somebody out if they're really working on something and stuck with something, but I won't do the work myself.
A question, have you ever run into the problem of the key doesn't turn? In the keyhole does not turn.
If the keyhole itself doesn't turn, well, that's really because you probably got the wrong key in it.
Oh, I think some old car they have some problem.
I've never had that problem.
Okay, so you don't have a real old car that's
Now, the Ferrari had a little bit of a quirk to it, but that was to do, it had a steering lock on it.
right,
So
yeah,
if you had the steering wheel locked in a certain position, you
right,
couldn't move the key.
yeah,
You
right, yeah.
had to jiggle it and force it, and then you could turn the key. But I think quite a few cars have that as well.
Right.
Anything else?
Okay,
Okay,
looks like everybody enjoy your talk, and thank you.
right. If anybody wants to contact me, I think, Kai, you have my email address and everything.
Right, yeah,
Feel free to give it to anybody that has a question or anything, okay?
yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
Chair.
Anybody?
Hey, Jerry.
do it. Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Jerry.
Thank you very much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this will be recorded. They had recorded. I'll publish that 1 week from now.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
And you can send me some of your nice pictures.
Okay,
Yeah, I put on our website.
okay, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you very much. Thank you.